the village. Welcome, guys. Happy Thursday.
Woo! Thursday. Almost the weekend.
Yes. Happy Friday Eve.
Okay.
So welcome, guys. We had a wonderful conversation on Tuesday, and this is our part 2 of our discussion, all about promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, the LGBT plus edition. That's right. We're asking the tough questions because it's time that we talk about it. We can't ignore it.
You're right. It's time to dig a little deeper. And I was taking my notes last time. So this time I'm excited. Part 2. I got my pen and paper ready.
Exactly. So we want you guys to, share your questions, share your concerns, your ideas in the comments. Because again, we learned on Tuesday that we cannot ignore the issue. Too many of our LGBT plus scholars are, experiencing depression,
right,
anxiety, just not feeling engaged, as if they don't have a safe place at school. So during Pride Month, which is June, we want to kind of reflect and step back and make sure that we're doing all that we can for all of our students. So again, we're promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, the LGBTQ plus edition. So we have some guests.
Oh yes, y'all. We about to get it popping.
Yes, Bernice and I are not the experts when it comes to inclusion, but we're open to learn. And we learned on Tuesday that that's what it takes, being open to learn and asking the tough questions and really just having a heart to love all students.
Exactly.
And that's what we're going to talk about today. So our guests, our educators, our specialists, come on in. Welcome to the village.
Woo! Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad I know people who are experts in this area. Whew. That is what the village is about. We know people, okay? So welcome, village folks, and we are glad that you guys said yes and you joined the village and you are willing to share your expertise. So we have some counselors, teachers, and specialists with us today, and I want you guys to introduce yourselves or reintroduce yourselves to the village, and then give us a takeaway from Tuesday or something important that you want our audience to know as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion. So, Monet, you were here on Tuesday, so I'm gonna let you go first. Reintroduce yourself to the village and then kind of share a little takeaway from Tuesday.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Monet Hawkins. Currently, I am a high school counselor in Prince George's County, and I have about 14 years experience being a counselor in the elementary and the high school setting. And I thoroughly enjoyed myself on Tuesday. I just want to preface everything with that. And I'm glad to be back. I think one of the takeaways that I had from Tuesday, and I believe one of the other panelists talked about it, and it was about how being tolerant is not enough, and how just because the environment is tolerant of who you are does not necessarily mean that you feel included, that you feel accepted, that you feel engaged. So it takes more than just being tolerant of people. It takes more, accepting, loving, and knowing who people really are. So that was one of the biggest takeaways I had from Tuesday.
Awesome. We're going to talk about that too. That was one of my favorite takeaways as well, Monet. So you kind of stole that from me. All right. So then we're going to move on to another counselor, professional school counselor. My line is just a little plug. Miss Myrlene Lionel, can you introduce yourself to the village and kind of give us a takeaway that you want folks to, remember as we kind of reflect during this month?
Yeah, sure. Good evening, everyone. My name again is Myrlene Lionel. I am a professional school counselor in Prince George's County. I started first in the classroom and then moved on and transitioned into high school counseling. So majority of my counseling experiences are in the high school, and it's been for the last 15 years. And so one of the things that, I wasn't in the meeting last Tuesday, but however, one of the things that I always try to tell everyone when it comes to this particular topic is continue educating yourself, and how you do that is just by simply asking and letting them know, I'm not familiar with this territory. What do you want me to know about you? What do you like for me to understand about your world? So that's one of the things that I've been practicing. and using, and it's worked so far for me. I have not yet put foot in my mouth, as we say, in this territory with the high school children yet. So, I pride myself in being really, as Dr. Hawkins said, being, mindful and not just being tolerant, but also taking their feelings into serious consideration.
Awesome. And then Mr. Montez, bring your voice to the room. Introduce yourself. That's what we say in school. Montez, introduce yourself to the village, and what is something that you want people to know about this topic?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Montez Freeman. I am a 4th grade ELA and math teacher with DC Public Schools. And one thing that I would love to encourage people to do this evening is get comfortable having those uncomfortable conversations, because someone has to start them. That's the only way that we're going to learn. And then also be willing to open up yourself to learning new things. We know that society is changing each and every day. And so it is our duty to keep up with how things are changing and because everyone deserves respect.
Awesome. Again, y'all are stealing some of my favorite takeaways. It's okay. It's all right. And finally, my girl from way back, Doc, and she's not a stranger to the village, by the way. She's been here since the beginning of the village. So Dr. Tysana Jones, reintroduce yourself to the village, and what is it that you want us to know?
So thank you again for inviting me on today. I love being a part of the village, and I love when I have an opportunity to come on and hang out with you guys. So I wasn't here on Tuesday, but as you and I talked about last night, there's just so many things. And my background is inclusion, and it has been forever as a special educator. And it's like the same stuff. It's the same practice. Ask questions, what you don't know. Read a book before you ask questions. Read something before you say, what do I need to know? Try to find out something about what you don't know, and then you want to go to ask questions. Don't be lazy. You can't be a lazy ally. You can't be a lazy advocate. You have to do the work. Just in like with race relationships, we don't want white folks walk up to say, well, tell me about racism. We don't want to have that conversation. So let's think about that from every other group. Do some research and then ask some questions. Do some lifting. You have to lift. All of us are learners, and we have to do the work first before we try to just get someone else to lift it for us. So I want us to think about, as we're getting to know all people, that we're asking questions, but before we start really asking questions, we do some research. Find out something and then ask purposeful questions so that you look like you're truly engaged and you're looking at, what am I doing? How can I change versus how does everybody else around me need to adapt to my ignorance? Like that's the wrong way. So let's go into it to learn and to look for how we can learn from every situation we're in so we can be better and we can check our own foolishness that needs to be checked at the door.
Wow. That was a couple of hashtags.
I was like, don't be
lazy ally. Okay.
And we're taking those.
Yeah, we're taking all of those. Okay. But your name will be on the hashtag somewhere, fine print. But the village logo will be really big. Okay. Just FYI. But we appreciate all the hashtags. But these are great points. I mean, we cannot be lazy. You're right. Do some research. I love it. So we're going to go over our favorite takeaways, even though you guys already mentioned it. So the first thing, again, our panelists on Tuesday, Ashton was with us, and they mentioned, that we can't be just tolerant, and that there is a difference between being actively engaged and and accepting versus being passive. So that is definitely something that we want to talk about, because there is a difference. We tolerate, the word tolerance itself lets you know that it's not good. You're just tolerating the students, and you're tolerating the family members.
It's lazy.
Yeah, it's lazy. So being accepting is being actively engaged, actively putting yourself out there, actively getting involved, making sure that those students have a safe space. So that is so important.
I wanted to jump in because I wanted to go back to something Monet said last time. And she was like, she thinks about the students as her child, her children, and we just need to love them. How would you want someone to interact with your child, your family member? Embrace them. Take that same spirit to that next person. And don't be, I'm gonna keep saying it, lazy, y'all.
Yes. So one of the things is you almost started singing, is that we just have to love.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to hear from our panelists today. Like, the foundation is love. What does that mean to you? When we talk about diversity and equity and inclusion, when the bottom line is we need to love all students. Who wants to jump on that first? All right. Okay, I'm gonna pick.
I'll jump in.
Montez and then Dr. Jones. Go ahead.
Well, being an educator, one thing that has always been instilled in me is that before any child can learn, they have to feel safe and they have to feel loved. So you can plan all day, you can, have the greatest lessons in the world, but you have to develop a relationship with that child where they feel safe and that they can trust you, and everything else will fall in place.
Exactly. So even for the teachers who are, nervous, they're scared, they don't know what to say, they're not like Miss Lionel who know exactly what words to say. And you got to build relationships, right? And that's why too often, our students don't go to the teacher. Right. They may not go to a parent, but they'll go to that counselor because they have that relationship with that person and because that person created a safe place. Dr. Jones.
Yeah, I mean, relationships, they're everything. I think, before we can get to anything, it's about relationships, feeling safe. Your school's supposed to be safe. The relationships are safe. You can't just expect to show up and because you're an adult, you're just going to get respect. When people tell me they're educators and it's March and they don't know their kids' names, I'm judging you. Let's be clear. Because if you don't know my name or you're mispronouncing it and you don't care that you're mispronouncing it or know my name, that's a problem. So if you don't know my name, you can't possibly know my story. And so we have to find ways to be professional, but to get into the business, to know who our children are, so they can come to us when they're not safe in another space, but they're not safe in our space as well. And we're allowing things to happen in our space. We're part of the problem. And so when I think about love, I think about the unconditional love of Christ. I have to. Like, if I wasn't a Christian, I don't know if I could be a teacher because I have to, I'm modeling, right? So I'm learning it. What is love and what does this unconditional look like? And how do kids know they're loved? Oh gosh, how do kids know they're loved in my space? So that's huge.
All right, that's good. That's good. So again, guys, we're talking about practical tips for how to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools. But the foundation has to be love. It has to be caring about your students and creating that safe space so that students can be their authentic selves. And we encourage students to come to us if there are any problems. So we want to hear from you guys as well. What are some practical tips that school teachers can do, school leaders can do to start the conversation? And I'll start with my counselors, Monet and then Ms. Lionel. What can we do to start?
I think the first thing, one of the first steps is to be open and to be available. If you're open and you're available, students or people in general will be drawn to you. They can feel it. They can feel that energy. And what I do in my practice and what I've always done, and it's something that I struggle with, is that I share my own life experiences. I just share who I am as a person. So I'm not just this adult who's just trying to tell you what to do. Like, I'm a person. I made mistakes. I had situations where I had to make tough choices and tough decisions, and I've made the wrong decisions sometimes. It's not like we're adults, we're perfect. We always make, those right decisions. So I think it humanizes us to them. It makes them feel like, oh, okay, this is a person that I can actually relate to. So that's something that I struggle with because sometimes I could overshare. Like it happens. So that's a boundary. That's a boundary issue that I work on every day for myself. But I feel like it's worth it if a student can trust me and to know that I'm there. just in case, they ever need me for anything. So, it's the price that I'm willing to pay to build those relationships, because that's the most important thing.
Ms. Lionel?
I was just getting ready to say the pretty much similar things, because as a counselor, the most important thing to know is your children's names. When they come to the office, you need to know their name. When you're in the hallway, you need to say, "Hi, Greg," "Hi, Bob," or whatever their name is, and knowing them, not just like, and then, terms and endearment. I know they frown upon that in the system. Oh, no hugging, no touching. But in the high school, it's a little different. So you are allowed to say, "Hey, baby, how are you? I love the hair." If it's, a child that's in the process of trying to figure out who they are, and you kind of notice that, today, yesterday he was, a boy. Today I'm noticing a little something different. He's got on foundation. You need to say, "Oh, I see you did something different. I'm liking the foundation. You're learning something new." Identifying with whatever little tidbit changes that they're making to let you know something different is getting ready to come. And I want to see who's going to recognize it and how they're going to react to me making that small change. Right. That little small tidbit change that they do. And they always let you know before they make the big one. And so recognizing and saying to them, "I like what I see. I see you're trying, to do something different." And then that opens up the door for them to come and say, "Well, what do you think about this?" And so on. It opens up a portal for them to come to you and say, "You look like somebody I can talk to."
Right.
Definitely.
But I like that, because it's talking about that passive and active role. A lot of people, a lot of educators, and I'll be honest, I'll throw myself out there. I have been in that situation where I'm like, "Oh, let me not say anything because I don't want to be offensive." But by me not saying anything, being very, very passive, I'm not being active in that student's journey. I'm not actively showing them that I am interested, that I do care, that I am there for them. So those tips, identifying with your students, like Monet said, sharing with your students, it bridges that gap. It really does.
And one of the things that Ashton mentioned on Tuesday is that, it's all about visibility. Do you see me? Really see me, and the fact that you said, "Hey, I like that," or "I noticed it," then that student can say, "Oh, Miss Lionel sees me." And so that's really, really important, because the students sometimes can feel ignored, or they're not part of the school community, different activities and different events. So I want to take it a little bit further. Okay, so I'm a teacher. I have great relationships, or I'm a school counselor. I have created that safe place. But as a school community, as a whole, we still have work to do. So let's get a little bit deeper. What can the schools do as a whole to make sure that as a community, we're not ignoring the issue? It shouldn't be just pockets. Just our counselors deal with that, no one else. Or just in Dr. Gaskin's classroom, that's a safe place, or in Mr. Freeman's class. But as a school community, how do we begin having those conversations, making sure everyone is being intentional and active and not passive? So how can we make it a school-wide initiative? And one of the things that we talked about on Tuesday, simple things like a permission slip coming home saying "Mom and Dad," or check this box, boy, girl, everyone has to wear a dress or a suit. Just little things like that, when we think about how our families and our students are interacting with our schools, everything matters. So we got to think about those things as well. So Dr. Jones, help us out with that. What are some little things that's really a big thing?
Choice. You talked about forms. Forms kill people. Like, forms been hurting people since we started adding race to the form. Right? I have friends in elementary school that were like blowing their minds out because they were biracial and there was no checkbox for them, right? And so allowing people to give their titles, their names, their pronouns, what they want to be referred to as, like, all those things matter. Who's at home? Who is your, who's your decision maker at your house versus parent, guardian? Who makes decisions? Who is your guardian? Who? Not is it this, because it could be a brother, a sister, and there's no box for that. So the name of your guardian and their relationship to you, have the child identify that. And so the more we stop trying to get things in check boxes, the more we can actually learn. So just think about a yes or no question versus a short answer question, because you get so much more from a short answer. When the yes or no question, you're not even getting all the information. You think you know, but it's not really the answer. It's just like an approximation. For like 50% of the kids, it's the answer. But for the other group, it's an approximation. So let's really know, and let's ask open-ended questions on these surveys and questionnaire. Excuse me. Something else I think is really important, or doing like identity conversations, even with your staff, so you can do it with your students. So students can talk about maybe 5 identities or 12 identities in their top 3. What's most important? Let's have conversations about identity. Am I a Black woman or am I a woman? That matters in certain conversations. And so getting people to have those conversations, and then you can start going deeper about sexual orientation or growing up rich, poor, and like all those things are a part of your identity, but really giving people the opportunity to talk about their identity and how they feel that it impacts their everyday life.
That's true. If you think about it, that's kind of like a training. Teachers, you talk about being lazy, but teachers have not had that training. And some of them need it. I think about myself, I'm a math person, so sometimes I can be very literal. And people need those experiences. They need these tips. So that's a great point.
All right. Any other tips for practical tips, Mr. Freeman?
Yeah, going back to what Dr. Jones was saying about like forming a committee at your school, one thing that I've noticed is even when I've served on DEI committees, we'll talk about class, we'll talk about race, but a lot of times, the LGBTQ plus community has no representation at the table. I'm sitting there, but my community is not brought up as a topic to discuss and how to navigate that in our own school. So I think one big important piece is not only having members of the LGBTQ plus communities at the table, but also actually having the discussions on how it affects, the staff, the students, and just normalizing it. Don't be afraid to have that uncomfortable conversation, and don't be afraid to learn.
Definitely. So I want to hear from the high school counselors, is there a task force? Is there a committee where the parents are involved or student leaders are involved when you guys are talking about these issues? Is there a club, a committee, a task force, a focus group? I don't know. Like, where is this conversation happening to kind of reflect and say, how is our school doing? Is there anyone kind of checking for this? Just like
So that's interesting that, we all on here as educators, one of the things that we have a constant conversation about, my colleagues and I, are the policies that's already in place that are outdated, that need to be updated. Once we have the policies updated, then we can start talking about creating a task force in the building with people who can with more people who can educate those that are uneducated. It's a very touchy subject still today with our African American parents. At one point we were thinking about starting an LGBTQ plus, team, and they went crazy. They were like, no, we don't want that. We're not ready for that. And surprisingly, I had a couple who were, a female couple, and they were like, I don't want my kid in that. I don't need for anyone teaching my child about, lesbianism or the gay community other than us. It was a nightmare. It was a sensitive nightmare for that parent. And it got really passionate. It got really, ugly quickly. because her child wanted to start the program at the school, and she was completely and totally against it.
And that's surprising coming from a high
I was very surprised. I was like, okay, so our community where I'm at in the southern end of the county is not ready for it. We've tried, I think about every other year that has come up, for us to create a group after school, club of some sort for the children. And the parents are like, no, we don't want it.
Wow.
So
I have some thoughts on that, but I want to hear
we
from
need policies, I think, that addresses that, as far as, we have teachers, and I currently have a student who is transitioning. So, and he no longer wants to be identified as a he. She has created a name for herself. She wants to be addressed by that name. And every time I call her by her name, I get pushback. Like, I could say the name 1,000 times in a meeting and everyone be like, who? And I'm constantly saying, we've been through this. I've given you the backstory, and now we're moving forward.
Right.
This is the name I will be addressing her as. I will be saying her because she has stated that she wants to be called her. Right. So let's not hold this meeting up any longer with me having to give you a backstory every 5 minutes. So, and then it comes to all the policy states this and the policy states that and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, for the sake of the child who we are educating and trying to make a plan and trying to support and so on and so forth, we're going to acknowledge what she's requesting.
Right.
That is crazy. Monet, home and change your name.
I'm sorry, Ms. Lionel, I'm sorry, but this is mind-boggling for me that this is happening in the high school. Do you kind of expect this in elementary or middle, where parents are a little reserved because I don't want my kindergartner to know about this, or I don't want my third grader to know about it? But really, high school, we need to kind of make sure that our children are ready for the world, and that they learn skills to be socially adapt to the community, the culture, what's going on. You can't put them in a box and say, close your eyes. So, Monet, how is it, what's the issue at your school? I want to know. Because now I'm curious.
Now you're in everybody's business.
Right. What's going on?
Well, one of the issues is that up until I think 2 years ago, we, at least as far as I know, started a GSA, a Gay Straight Alliance. So that, very late, but better late than never.
Exactly.
It's difficult. I think the parent acceptance or openness to it is difficult because I think a lot of times parents conflate sexual identity and sexual orientation with sex.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and they don't see the difference. They just hear the sex part and think it's something that it isn't. So they don't want to have the conversation. Just like people don't want to have conversations about like suicide prevention, because like we say suicide, that's going to make them want to commit suicide. So that's not how it works. But it's really hard for people to get that and to understand that. And even though ideally it would be great if we could get, this great parent involvement in this task force. But what I like to focus on are the students, because those are the people that I see every day, that I interact with every day, that are having the struggles. And I can't wait to get the parents on board to help them, because then, it's going to be a lot of turmoil in between. But just having this conversation, it's making me feel like it's something that I should really start. I should try to get started next year, just to see if we can get some kind of parent task force type, just have discussions. I'm really, I really appreciate that as a suggestion, because that's something that I think that I could try, and you just keep trying, and that's all we can do. But as long as we got the students on board and we're there for them, then that's the only thing that we can do with what we have. And we got to hope that, we can pour into them so much that, that they'll be okay on their journey.
Definitely. And so one of the things we also want to do, guys, is give teachers some practical tips for different situations that may come up. So Ms. Lionel just mentioned it. A student is transitioning and they're changing their pronouns. So that's just one scenario. Here's another one. What if a student who hasn't come out yet to their parents, but yet they're having issues at school? That there may be signs of depression, maybe they're getting bullied, and it all stems from their sexual identity so help a teacher who has a student coming to them and say, I'm being bullied, it's making me depressed, I'm having these thoughts, but I can't go to my parents because I haven't told them the real issue. So of course you're gonna hug them, but what do you do in that situation where you may have to talk to the parent because the situation may call for it, but you don't want to put the child's business out there until they're ready? So what are some practical tips for when you can't ignore it because it's it could be a serious situation. Right. We're dealing with bullying, we're dealing with depression and all those things. So what can a teacher do? Dr. Jones, you're first.
Okay. Come on. I'm just thinking to focus on the mental health piece of it. And so without outing the child, I would talk about I'm really concerned about your child. They used to be really outgoing and bubbly, and now they're withdrawn. Like, I'm just concerned. I would reach it from that mental health piece. And I would also be talking to the child as well about naming what's going on, what they're experiencing, and asking about some support. Definitely be in communication with counselors to do some wraparound in the physical space at the school. But as far as I would talk to the child. I have to talk to your parents. I'm not going to out you, but I'm concerned about you and I want you to be okay. And I want you to be safe physically in school and out in the world. How can I support you? So really talking to both sides, to parents as well as to the child, but really getting an idea of where they're having the issues. If it's a bullying situation, is it in the locker room? Is it in the bathroom? Is it where is it physically in the school? And then placing some support in those physical spaces, but also talking to the child about what's going on and how we can help them have a conversation with their parents about what their experiences are, even if they're not ready to come out. But I'm not happy in school. I'm having issues socially, something like that. So just trying to couch that conversation or those series of conversations between the two entities.
Definitely. Montez, I have a question for the elementary students. Sometimes, elementary school scholars, they don't know words sometimes that go along with how they're feeling. Okay. And so when we talk about, the mental health of our elementary students, and they may be having these strange feelings, they may be getting bullied, they may be getting called names, you're a sissy, you're gay, stop acting like a girl, or stop acting like a boy, or what have you. And the third graders just trying to have fun and go to school and learn. So how do you navigate working with an elementary student who's, you might see some things, they're getting bullied, or they're having some issues navigating their world and not feeling safe and engaged at school? Help us out.
Yeah, I love how Dr. Jones talked about helping students name what they're experiencing. And I think that's important, especially for schools to pull in like social, emotional support, curriculum, so that you can make that a part of your everyday routine, literally just talking about feelings and, going through, different scenarios, so that when something like that does pop up, it doesn't seem like this random thing that we're now all of a sudden talking about. And now the kid feels kind of like they are being targeted. So making it just a part of your regular everyday routine, and just helping students name what they are experiencing, and teaching acceptance.
He is hitting on some good stuff too. And I also see, look, I'm listening and I see that the comment section is blowing up. Yeah. So I want to kind of read them. Can we get a little help? Because it's a little small on our end. I'm gonna have to go in. How about I'm gonna step off camera for a moment and then I'll read the comments to you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. Come on. It's okay.
So here we go. From a parent's perspective, my child's schools had these kind of conversations with my child, but I didn't hear it from the school. I had to hear it from my child. So this person is talking about, making sure that the parents are still kept in the loop. And then a follow-up. I like it. They said, yes, train your teachers. My daughter's pre-K class, one of the students had 2 moms. One day he asked the male teacher if he could be his dad. The teacher was not ready for that question.
All right, can someone respond to that? Because that's an issue as well. When we have students where they have 2 moms or 2 dads, and then they want to talk about their family, and everyone else said, well, my mom did this, my dad did this, and they're like, well, my 2 moms, so, and then they may shy away from talking about their experiences because they feel like they're different or they're going to get talked about. So I think Montez talked about that as well, about acceptance. And even at the elementary level, you can talk about how all families come in different shapes and sizes. Love is love. It doesn't matter. So talk to me about that. And who wants to go first? Monet, and I really like to pick on the high schools. I'm about to fight on the high schools. That's all. Y'all made me mad. I'm sorry. Monet, let's talk about that.
In that regard, I think that, those kind of conversations should start at home. I think it's important for parents to normalize all different types of families because families look so different. Grandparents are raising children, 2 moms, 2 dads, whatever it may be. And if parents normalize that with their children and have those conversations just as a regular conversation, it will help alleviate some of the anxiety that a child may feel who has a family that looks different than the traditional nuclear family. I think a lot of times, a lot of pressure is put on educators to do all of the teaching and all raising, and we can't. Like it's just not. It's not possible. Yeah. It needs to be. Just as a parent myself, as an out lesbian woman myself, I make sure that when my son was younger, I had conversations with him about how our family may look different than another, a peer's family, and how that's okay. Different is okay. This is what we do here. That's what they do there. And actually, that's none of our business what they do there. So that's where I come from. I sometimes feel so much pressure that we're supposed to raise these young people in all aspects. And it's just not, it's not feasible, and it's not our job.
Right. Not fair, right.
Yeah. That's it.
And I go ahead, Ms. Lionel. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, as far as the comment that was made about the conversation taking place in school and the parent wasn't aware of it. So one of the things I remember, it's been so long ago for me teaching, one of the things that I always did, I did an introduction letter. And in the letter, I mentioned that there are things that we cover in certain subjects like health. We discuss this. I kind of stroked through the curriculum for health. And if there was a touchy subject in there, I may mention that these discussions may come up in the classroom so that parents are aware. I'm not going to send you home a pre-letter to say, this is going to be the discussion that I'm going to have with your child today. But in general, the introduction letter will touch, there will be things that are discussed along the line of this. We may discuss what families look like, nuclear family. Now, like, Dr. Hawkins said, we're going to have families that are totally untraditional. So there will be conversation addressing particularly those subjects. Mm-hmm. So if you do not, and they're going to say, no, don't have those subjects, you kind of have to put that in the forefront and say, hey, I'm going to have this conversation in the classroom, how do you want to handle this when it comes to your child? So I think that as educators, we need to always be mindful that while we're having a conversation you thought is harmless, it may be something that is going to come up as harmless for a parent.
Awesome.
That build a community.
Exactly. And
building
so
the community connection.
Exactly. I like what you guys are saying, but it's all about being prepared to respond and how you're going to respond. Because we can't name every situation that's going to come up or that could possibly come up as it relates to this topic. But if we could just remember that one simple word, love. So respond in love. So regardless, if you have an angry parent because, there was something that came up or they, just trying to start this club, you still got to respond in love and say, hey, the bottom line is we care about all students. We care about all families. So yes, we value your concern and your opinion. But again, we need to make sure all of our students have a safe place and they feel seen. So if we could just remember to respond in love from all points of view, then, like you said, the world will be a better place. We're not going to sing today. We're not going to sing.
One day I'm sing.
But I want to hear from all of you because we're about to wrap up because I'm looking at the time. I can talk about this forever. But part three, I don't know. But those of you who are joining us, you may be asking, Dr. Ross, it's June. Why are we having this conversation right now? Like, really? In June, why we didn't have it at the beginning of the school year? Well, first of all, it's Pride Month. And then secondly, this is an opportunity for you guys to use your summertime to inform yourself. Do some research. Like Dr. Jones said, don't be a lazy ally. Okay, so we're having these conversations now so that you can get that book, get that article, and educate yourself so that you can do better next school year. And then some of us are on leadership teams, and you guys are going to be planning different things over the summer. So if you know that this is a topic that needs to come up, maybe a professional development, a training
organization, like Monet said.
Right, whatever, even a book study. Maybe you should advise that for your school's leadership team and say, you know what? I was, listening in with the village and they talked about being a lazy ally, and we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we are accepting all of our students and making sure that we have a true inclusive environment. So I want to hear from all of our panelists. And again, what's something that you want to make sure that people do next? Like what next? Okay, I know I need to do my research. I know I need to be actively involved and advocate for all of my scholars. What do you want folks to walk away with? And I'm going to start with my counselors, Ms. Lionel and then Monet.
Okay. So again, I'm a big advocate of let's talk about it. Let's get uncomfortable with having these courageous conversations within our, educational community, meaning let's start in the building. If you're uncomfortable with a particular topic, let's unpack it so that you're not uncomfortable anymore. Okay. If you don't know, educate yourself. And how do you educate yourself? As Dr. Jones said, read something. And then if you're reading something and you have a question, well, what do I do if the child comes to me and the child says, well, my name is such and such, don't call me this. But the roster says her name is, Jessie, and she wants to call Bob. Go with what the child said. Let's educate and be sensitive in that love. Be sensitive in love, not just love. Oh, I love all my kids, but you're not very sensitive. Let's do that.
Good. Very good. Okay, hashtag be sensitive. Okay. All right, in love. Be sensitive in love. Get my hashtags right.
I got it.
Okay, Monet.
I would say to continue the conversation. It's not a one and done. Oh, we talked about it. I got this training. I learned something, and then that's it. It's an ever evolving subject topic. It's very sensitive. So to have the continued conversations, I think it's important, and also to believe people when they tell you who they are, whether you agree, don't agree, or say, oh, you too young to know who you are, to know what you like, to know. Believe people when they tell you, and just take it as that.
Good. Okay, I got the hashtag. Okay, Mr. Freeman.
I would say figure out if you are sitting in an uncomfortable space where you don't feel comfortable talking about it. Figure out why that is, unpack that, because that is the only way that you're going to be able to come to the table and have an honest and genuine conversation. Is you got to figure out what's going on with you first and why you're uncomfortable having these conversations, and find ways to connect. I think if you are trying to have these conversations with, your children or, just other youth that you may come in contact with, find a way to connect by, finding literature or finding, a film that, both of you can watch and then kind of have a discussion around that. So it's just not, some random conversation. I think that kind of creates a bit of comfort there.
Love it.
Montez reminded me of another person we had, Mr. Muhammad, when he was like, why are you uncomfortable? What is that that's hindering you? I like that.
Yeah.
I like it.
And, I just thought about too, some people like to hide behind religion as well as their excuse for not being accepted.
She touching it.
Now that's the part 3.
That's part 3.
That's part 3 and 4.
Right. That would be part 3 and 4 and 5. But we can't hide, because I'm a Christian, and I know most of you on here are Christians, but we can't hide behind that. Because again, the foundation is love. Because God is love. So if we can just start there, and I know we've seen things on the news where people say, I'm a Christian, so I'm not going to call them by a different name, or I'm not going to address them by a different pronoun. But you know what? Love your students. So I love that. So go ahead, Dr. Jones. I'm sorry. I'm not going to bring it up.
Since you took my notes and took that my religion, stop hiding behind religion. I was going to say. But I will speak to something that I thought about, and I still can't believe this is still an issue. And I've taught little people to older people, and I am appalled when I find out that schools are making life difficult for their children. Something as basic as where do children go to the bathroom? And so if we have a child who's that's a horror without adding LGBTQ plus to the mix, right? Because high school bathrooms are a scary place just in general, right? And so now we're adding this. I'm trying to figure out my body. Are there doors? Or, who's going to be in there? Am I going to be able just to go and do what I got to do without being tortured in this space where I have a physical need to take care of? And so I want to make sure that schools don't become the handicapping or the place that's the mosh pit of problems for our children. The idea of a child being tortured in the bathroom or needing to figure out where to go to the bathroom or not going to school or holding it all day because there's nowhere safe for them to go to the bathroom scares me. Or the nurse isn't there today, so now they can't go to the nurse's office. And so making sure our school is physically safe and kids feel safe has to be our number one priority. The idea of young people committing suicide, dropping out of school is real. We know that the numbers are high. If you can understand that what we're doing and what we're saying and what we're not doing for our kids is causing them to physically kill themselves, it is that serious. And if we don't agree, we don't have to agree with it. But in love, you make sure that children are not hurting themselves and because they're not getting what their needs met. Like that, it's that serious. I have lost a high school friend because of this, because he didn't feel accepted and that's a real thing. And so we can't let our school be the place where our kids are unsafe and are targets. And it has to be a number one priority that every child in that school physically feels safe and seen. It has to be a priority.
Love it. Love it. Ooh. Well, we have a ton of notes, a ton of hashtags. So I appreciate our panelists today. Again, we can keep going. We can do a part 3 or part 4, but we have to end the conversation, unfortunately.
Right.
But thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for joining the village. Please don't be a stranger. So we're going to try to do this topic again. So I have all of your numbers. I'll be calling you. So
They've already said yes.
They said yes. So again, thank you. Please, everyone who's on the panel, put your information, put your comments, so that people can kind of dialogue and engage with you after we log off. So even after the live, we want to continue the conversation. Let's keep it going, okay? And you can steal some of our hashtags. All right. So thank you again, and we'll talk to y'all later. All right. Woo, that was so good.
That was good. Girl.
Okay, we need some t-shirts with all our new hashtags.
I know.
Okay.
We'll put their names real small again.
Real small, but the village logo will be really, really big. Hashtag don't be a lazy ally. Okay. And what was it? Be sensitive
in love.
Okay. We got some good stuff. All right. So village, that was really good. I hope you guys are enjoying the conversation and that you are being comfortable with being uncomfortable. That was from Mr. Montez.
Montez.
Who's a member of the what?
Village.
Okay. So we appreciate our panelists and we thank you for coming. Guys, continue this discussion in the comments. If you have any questions, if you have any ideas to share, let's keep the dialogue going. Again, this week has been all about promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, the LGBTQ plus edition. I've been doing it all week. I don't know. It's because it's Thursday. But again, guys, remember, just love our students, all students, and make sure you're creating a safe place. All right. Continue to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Village LG. Okay. Thanks, Coach Williams, for joining me.
No problem.
All right, guys. So remember, teacher leadership is a mindset,
Not a position.
See you next week. Oh, that was Meryl. All right.
That was so good.
That was so good. Y'all did so excellent. Let me pause real quick.
That was good.
What y'all think?
Those were some great topics.
What you say?
I said those were some great topics.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad y'all liked it and y'all flowed. Y'all was with it. That's what you said. Y'all just kind of picked up on it. That was good.
Get on it.
Yeah, we picked the right experts. We did. It was the Holy Spirit.
You're so crazy.
Something's wrong with her.
So for real though, we love y'all comments for real. So seriously, we may put like some flyers up on our Facebook page, and we're gonna give y'all credit. We joke about it, but, but they were really good. So I hope